This is April 30th, 2024, and we are so pleased that we have Anne Osborne from CalABLE who's going to talk to us about CalABLE, how you can use it with the special needs trust, how you cannot use it with the special needs trust, all the many uses. And we've been doing these webinars for quite a while. I will say we get enough changes every year that we get something different. So this year's no different. So, as we like to say, CalABLE is an evolving program. It's kind of like a fine piece of art that's never completely finished, always putting a few extra touches. How's that? Part of this, as we get into this, for those of you that are watching this for credit, we are doing this for credit. In order to receive credit, if you're an attorney or a private fiduciary, what you need to do is download the MCLE credit form here at gspt.org/attorney resources, and then you're going to fill in the proper codes for each section. Now, if you really get all caught up and can't get through that, you can also email amy@gspt.org. Also, to keep in mind that we do try to do at least one program a month. We have a number of programs coming up so if you want to just keep up with what's going on in the whole special needs trust benefit world, advocacy world, make sure that you sign on. And at this point, you are the deputy executive director, and we were just talking that I heard a rumor we actually have an executive director coming up. But Anne, you've been with CalABLE for quite a while here. Is that correct?
Yes, actually, September will be 5 years, if you can believe that. I've been with CalABLE for almost 5 years. And yes, we do have a new executive director. His name is Thomas Martin. He comes to us from CalVet. He also is a person that has autism, and he also has 2 children with autism. So he is a strong advocate for the program. Being a parent, he has gone through some of the things that people with disabilities experience. So it's great to have him on board. You can find out all his information in our April newsletter. So if anyone is receiving the CalABLE newsletter, it's certainly available. His information is available there.
But I would just mention as we jump into this, actually, CalABLE does a lot of different programs at all sorts of different levels and that kind of thing. And if people want to stay in touch and be in the loop and be in the know, how would they keep up with what you guys are doing?
There's a couple ways. They can actually go on our email. If they go to the calable.ca.gov website, they can get sign up for the listserv. We have a listserv that we actively promote any new information. All our information about our monthly webinars are there. So that's one way. We're also on social media, Facebook, X, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And so we're always posting information there. So we've got, if you're on social media, I think you pretty much can find us. One of the big things is we put all our videos on YouTube. So we have a strong presence on YouTube. Steve, we just crossed over 1,000 views right now. So our YouTube channel is very active. So we appreciate all those viewers that have became part of our family.
Well, like a lot of these things, I think both as users, but also as advocates, the more we understand this, the better, and all that. So anyway, once again, Anne, if you want to just start plowing on through, let's learn about CalABLE.
All right. So as this first slide says, everyone with a disability should know about CalABLE. And if you haven't heard about us, this is the time to learn. And if you have, we're going to be giving you some of the new updates. So, okay. So CalABLE is a tax advantage savings and investment program designed to help people with disabilities achieve their financial dreams. And really, CalABLE is part of the federal ABLE Act that was passed in 2014, and ABLE stands for Achieving a Better Life Experience. We are actually part of the IRS tax code. We are 529A. So our people with ABLE accounts, those accounts, if they were to be reviewed, it's going to be somebody from the IRS that would be doing those reviews of those accounts. So CalABLE does not look at your accounts. We strictly have these accounts so you can achieve those financial dreams that you have set for yourself. So why do we need CalABLE? As we know that it's no secret that having a disability can be expensive. And, if you are disabled, there are many things that you could be using these accounts for. You could be having your house, if you need it to be accessible for any reason, if you need equipment, or just anything that might make your life a little bit easier. That's what these accounts are designed to help you with. There is a statistic out there right now that if you have a disability, it's going to cost you 28%. It's going to be 28% more expensive for you to maintain your quality of life. So it's very important that we have these accounts. So that is where CalABLE comes in. And if you are on a means tested benefits, oops.
Oh, that might have been my fault.
Go back. Go back. Let's see.
Here,
There we go. Oh, okay. What? One more, Steve. Forward. There we go. Okay. So if you are receiving means tested benefits, you are familiar with that $2,000 resource. So if you go over resources, if you have more than $2,000, you could lose your benefits. And so that's what's nice about CalABLE is that you can actually put money in those CalABLE accounts. Let's say you get some extra money from a family member or a friend. You put that in the CalABLE account, it doesn't count as a resource. So it's a great way for you to save and still maintain those benefits. Once you save up to $100,000, at that point, if you want to maintain your benefits at that point, you would need to do what we call a spend down. Otherwise, you could continue to let these accounts grow if you're not worried about your resources. Let's see. Okay, so one of the things is CalABLE is administered by the state of California. It's chaired by the state treasurer's office. Again, with these ABLE accounts, as I mentioned, it's a federal program. And so what this federal program allowed is it allowed each state to manage these accounts for their account holders in their states. Right now, we have 140 million in assets under management. And we just recently crossed the 11,000 people that have CalABLE accounts. So our program is growing. We are a little bit over 5 years. Our first accounts opened in 2018. So we just crossed 5 years. So we are we have a lot of people that have trusted their money with us, and we're really happy that they have made this decision. The other thing is that if you had a disability before age 26, you can open a CalABLE account. That means that diagnosis needs to be before age 26. You can actually open this account at any age. You could be you could be a young family and your child may have a disability, or you could be older, you could be in your 40s, and you can also open these accounts. It's really when did that diagnosis occur, and as long as it occurred before age 26, you're eligible to open these accounts. This is super sensitive. Okay, so we're going to talk about some questions here. Who is eligible? As I mentioned, you need to have that disability before age 26. And if you are currently receiving SSI or SSDI and that disability occurred before age of 26, you're automatically eligible to open these accounts. Something that's coming in 2026, the Able Age Adjustment Act was passed in 2022, and now in 2026, if you are 46, you are going to be able to open an account. So it has increased that age from 26 to 46. So we're really excited. It's going to allow more people to open these accounts, including our veterans. So you may ask the question, well, I'm not receiving benefits. Can I still open an account? And absolutely you can, as long as that disability is in the Social Security Administration's list of compassionate allowances or Blue Book listings. So if your disability is in one of those publications you are on, but you can open these accounts. Again, we want to remember, emphasize that the disability has to occur before age 26. If you're using those as your reference, we do ask that you get a letter from a physician stating that that disability occurred before age 26. CalABLE does, we ask you to have that letter. We ask it again because if the account was reviewed, not by CalABLE, but it could be reviewed by somebody from the IRS, they're going to ask you for that letter. So it's just a good practice to have it when you're going to open these accounts. How much can I save? That's a great question here. Right now in 2024, you can put up to $18,000 into your account. This can come from multiple sources, third party, family, friends, however you would like. However people would like to contribute, this is how they can contribute. Again, we talked about that $100,000. If you're receiving benefits, once your account gets up to $100,000, if you want to stay on benefits, you're going to need to do that spend down. If you're going to not be on benefits, you're going to keep having those accounts grow. You can contribute up to $529,000. So, I know the goal for a lot of people is to get off those benefits, and I just had this question. I'm getting close. I'm going to be, I've been able to get a job and I'm not going to need to stay on benefits. Do I still need my CalABLE account? And I said, absolutely. It's just a way for you to continue to save for the future. And now you can even go above that $100,000 and actually save up to $529,000. So it's just a great tool for any future savings goals that you may have.
And it may be in a future slide, but it's important to remember that that's just talking about SSI. The Medicaid is to continue. And the really cool thing is that if for some reason it drops down below $100,000 here, as long as you're otherwise eligible, you don't have to go through the whole redetermination process. It's not a lot of fun doing that the first time. We would want to do it twice. So,
right. Another way you can actually add additional funds to your account is if you are working. As long as your employer does not have a retirement plan, you can actually add up to $14,580. So if you were working and you had a lot of generous friends, you could potentially save up to $32,000 in this calendar year of 2024. So there are a lot of benefits to having a CalABLE account. My favorite question, what can I spend my money on? And this really is just a lot of different items, but the way we define this is we call these qualified disability expenses. And the definition of that is, does that expense help you to improve your health, your independence, or quality of life? If that expense meets one of these definitions, then it's an eligible expense. On the screen here, you'll see many different categories, such as education, transportation, assistive technology, legal fees, And the big category is and more. And everyone goes, what does that mean? It means you could use it for food. You could use it for entertainment. You want to go have coffee with your friends. As long as it meets that definition of, does this improve your health, your independence, or your quality of life, it is an eligible expense. On housing, there is a restriction on the housing. On housing, you do need to spend that money within this calendar month. So if you're going to use your CalABLE account for rent, then you would want to make sure you withdraw that money on the first of the month and spend it by the end of the month. If you spend it outside of that calendar month, it could be counted as a resource. So we want to make sure that you spend it in the correct month that you are using. You could even use it for utilities. So anything related to housing, you want to just make sure you spend it in that calendar month. The question we always get asked is, so what is not a qualified disability expense? And that would be gift giving, because you are purchasing something for somebody else. It's not directly benefiting you, and anything illegal. So as long as you're spending your money on items that, again, improve your health, your independence, or your quality of life, those would be eligible expenses. CalABLE does not ask you for your receipts. So the recommendation is that you keep your receipts, keep track of those, because again, if your account was reviewed, they're going to ask you for those receipts. So it's a good habit just to have those receipts.
And maybe we can linger on that for just a minute.
Sure.
But although let's do this first part. This is our first MCLE code for this. So for those of you that are doing this for credit, you need to write down this code, which is 5728. That's 5728. And then just remember, to get the form, you go to gspt.org/attorney resources here, and you'll have instructions on what to do. And let's just go back just for a minute, if this is okay.
Sure.
While I'm screwing up the
PowerPoint. There we go.
You know, a couple of really important things. And Anne, I know you kind of led off on this, because I was pretty involved with the ABLE Act while it was getting set up here. And we all assumed that Social Security was going to be all over this. And then we all kind of came to the conclusion that this isn't run by Social Security. This is run by the IRS. Believe it or not, the IRS has a long history of being actually very disability friendly here. And actually the rules have been quite liberal. As we're going to see later, some of we're going to see a directive that's going to come up from Social Security itself that basically says, with a few limitations, keep your hands off of these accounts. This is not our wheelhouse. This is the IRS's wheelhouse here. So generally, not always, but generally, you're not going to have Social Security or the other programs that are going to be really digging through this. Not that one should get loose about this, but to your knowledge, Anne, how many accounts have been reviewed by the IRS? And to our knowledge, how many penalties have we had?
CalABLE participates on the National Association of State Treasurers group. We are active in that. And I have not heard of anything at this point. So I think because these balances haven't been bumping up to those limits yet, I don't think, they're being really viewed. But you just never know. But, we may start seeing something as we get to those higher limits. That's a possibility. But we always encourage people to keep those receipts. It's just a good habit to get into, especially if it's a really large purchase. You always want to keep, I'm a receipt person. So for me, I just take all my receipts and I put them in a basket. And at the end of the year, I just put them all in an envelope and I'm good. Um, but I would really recommend if you're doing really large purchases, something that is not something that like going to the grocery store. I don't know if they would be as particular on a $30 purchase, but if you've got something that's a $5,000 purchase, I'm sure if someone was to review your account, they're probably going to ask you for those items and maybe not the $30 purchase. So again, I would advise all receipts, but especially large items.
As you should, and we wouldn't discourage this. But once again, I will say for those of us that are planners and all that, one of the advantages of I guess we're not going to use the word launder this time of running expenditures through an Able account is that it's going to have less scrutiny here. That doesn't mean that anything goes here, but for a lot of folks, especially when families are administering these things, I find this a much safer way to go. The other thing is it's almost easier, as Anne went through, to kind of go through what you can't use it for. You can't use it for gifts. You can't use it for illegal drugs. Or illegal anything here. Other than that, it's been kind of hard to find something that doesn't enhance the quality of life of a person with a disability. But I'm sure we'll find the boundaries someday. But there you go. Okay,
We will.
so let's keep plowing through here.
Okay, sounds great. Now let me make sure I can. Ah, there we go.
We
So
did that.
that one. Okay, we're going here. This is just one of our ambassadors. Her name is Dominica, and she actually used her account to help her with closing costs when she bought her home. So again, that was a goal that she had. She actually is gainfully employed, so she has her Able account really to help her with just some long-term retirement planning. She can put that $18,000 in. She does have, like I said, an employer that has a retirement account for her, so she can't put the extra, but she knew she wanted to purchase her home. Was looking at her account, thought, oh, that's right, I have money in my CalABLE. Great, I can use some of that, apply it towards a closing costs. So, sometimes you just you don't know what you're going to need it for until it actually happens.
We actually helped one of our clients last year purchase a house, and it came from a combination of contributions from family and earnings. So it's a real thing.
So how do I open an account? Great question here. The first thing is you can only have one Able account. That's part of the federal law. So if you're living in California, you can open your CalABLE account. Let's say you move to another state, you can take that account with you. But if that state may have some extra protections as being a resident of that state, then what you want to do is you want to just roll it over into that state's Able account. But CalABLE is a national program, so you can take it with you wherever you want to go. The other thing is the person with the disability is the owner of this account. And this is where it really works well with those special needs trusts that Steve's going to be talking about here. It really gives you a little more flexibility. So that's why it's a great partnership with anyone who has a special needs trust. So the account owner is always the owner. If you have someone managing it on your behalf, that would be an authorized legal representative. They would manage it on your behalf, but you are still the owner of this account. So who can be an authorized legal representative? They have expanded this list. So first person would be somebody who has power of attorney. Second person would be legal guardian or conservator, a spouse, a parent, a sibling, grandparent. If you have a rep payee through the regional center, they are now eligible to open these accounts on your behalf. And also, if the beneficiary requests somebody else to be their ALL, to be their authorized legal representative, they can also do that. So they have expanded this list from a few years ago. but that is the hierarchy of who can be an authorized legal representative. This is our website, calable.ca.gov. So when you're ready to open your account, this is what your screen should look like. If you don't see this, then you're not on the CalABLE website. How do I maximize my account? We've kind of talked a little bit about this. We've talked about that your family and friends can do this. When you open your account, there is another way you can have people deposit money into your account, and that's called e-gifting. So it's basically, if you're familiar with the GoFundMe account, this is actually how some people have used this account. They've set up these e-gifts for home purchases. Maybe they're saving for an accessible van. Maybe they need a computer or whatever they need. That's a great way for people to put money in your account, and they don't even need to ask you. You just send them this link, and then they can just go right into your account and put money. They can put money in, they cannot withdraw. So that's a good thing there. If you have a prepaid card, you can actually use a prepaid card to withdraw money if you needed to withdraw any money. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. And we've talked about actually putting your earnings from work into your account. So there's several ways you can do that. Set up reoccurring deposits. Let's say you're putting money in your regular checking account and you want to always put $50 in your CalABLE account. You can set up a reoccurring contribution and money will automatically be transferred every month on whatever day you say. The nice thing now is if you are receiving SSI benefits, you can actually have that money directly deposit into your account. One thing I'll mention here is if you do select this, it's going to be the entire amount of the check. So if you're getting $600 a month from Social Security, that full amount is going to go into your CalABLE account. Social Security cannot direct a portion of that check. It's going to have to be the entire amount. So just to let you know that that option is available. If you're working, you can set up direct deposit. This one you can actually say how much you would like to put in your CalABLE account. So if you want to put $50 a month from your work check, you can have that set up. And then the last way is you can actually physically mail a check into the office. We talked about e-gifting. Again, this is something that you can use your account for. People can put money into that. You know, we are getting towards the end of the school year, so if we've got any graduations, this is a great way for people to put money into your account for a goal that you may have, for going away to school or just other items that you may need. So this is a nice feature that we have.
And just kind of in that future, because oftentimes when we're doing trust administrations after somebody passes away, one of the problems with a lot of our benefit laws is without an ABLE account. Generally giving cash to a person on a needs-based benefit is a real problem. And oftentimes people will give cash to a person with a disability and hope they don't get caught. Well, this is a nice legal way where you don't have to sweat and behave like a criminal, hiding that grandma gave you $50. Oh my God. Here, you can do this right out in the open legally. It's even moral. So there you go.
Yes. So take the money that you have been tucking away under your mattress and go and open your CalABLE account with that. Hector here is actually an ambassador in that we talked about e-gifting, and that's exactly how he got the down payment for a 2-bedroom, 2-bath mobile home for his mom and him to share. He did e-gifting, and that's how he was able to accomplish that. So it does work. We even have people that share their stories with us. So we do have different investment portfolios. We have changed program administrators, so we are now with Vestville State Savings. And we have now 8 different portfolios. In the past, we had 4. And these are who manage those portfolios, Fidelity, Schwab, and Vanguard. Again, all these accounts grow tax-free. And as they continue to grow, if you don't touch it, they're going to grow a little bit quicker because those earnings are going to be compound on each other. So that's a great thing to have. These are the different portfolio options. We still have that FDIC insured portfolio, which a lot of people are familiar with, against that passport savings account there. We have the income portfolio, which is bonds and money market securities. A little less risk, but still some risk associated. And then depending on what you're comfortable with as far as your risk level, we have all different portfolios. And then they start with conservative, 20% stocks, 80% bonds, down to our aggressive one, which would be the growth, which is 100% stocks. So it's really dependent on how you want to plan your financial future. You do have the opportunity to divide these up. So you could do some in FDIC insured, and then you could do some in the different portfolios. So FDIC, we see that more as a transactional account. People are moving money in and out quite quickly, often. Those other portfolios, we see those more for those long-term growth. We do have some fees associated with these accounts. Again, this is if you had $3,000 in your account. You will always pay an account maintenance fee no matter which portfolio you are. It is an annual fee. It's only going to be $30 annually. And then if you're an FDIC insured, you will have an additional state administrative fee. Again, based on this example, it would be $38.40. That would be the annual fee. If you're in investment portfolios, you'll have some additional fees, the underlying fees, and the program management fee. And you still have the state administrative fee. Again, based on $3,000, it could be between $42 and $46. So roughly on a quarterly basis, you're probably looking at somewhere between $10 to $12 every quarter that you would see coming out of your account. So that is, again, this is just based on $3,000. If you had a little less than $3,000, that administrative fee would be a little less. If you had more, then it's going to be a little bit higher. So that is how the fees are structured. We can talk a little bit about the prepaid card, and I know this is a great tool for especially with special needs trust and CalABLE. This is a way that somebody could put money on a prepaid card for the person to spend on those qualified disability expenses. They could put $100 on that. They could use it, and then they would not have like full access to the entire CalABLE account. So it's a nice way for people to use their money and not always have to ask for permission. So that's what's really nice about these accounts. Again, the beneficiary is the one that owns these accounts. So they're the ones that can, have access to these accounts. There is no monthly fee with the prepaid card. Why choose CalABLE? I think we've answered a lot of these questions today. It really does give you that opportunity to save and plan for your future. Your benefits are protected. If you are a resident of California and you have a CalABLE account, it's going to be protected against Medi-Cal recovery. The state did pass a law on that to protect that. Your family and friends can contribute. Again, the money grows tax-free in here. And it does give you that opportunity to spend money on things that will help to improve your health, your independence, or quality of life. And the best thing is you would be part of our community. As I said, we have 11,000 account holders, so you would be one of our treasured account holders.
Okay, and then we are moving along here. So, I need to go backwards one. Okay, so our second code is 4090. That's 4090. Okay, we're moving like a freight train here. And so let's just keep plowing ahead. Oh, I'm up. Oh my goodness. Okay. By the way, in going through this, uh I know a lot of practitioners when the ABLE Act was put through is like, well, this is going to be the end of planning as we know it, that it's going to eliminate the need for special needs trusts. And um, and I have to say, it has not. I think what it's actually done for a lot of practitioners, as we like to say, it's given us a new tool in the toolbox here, and we've actually found that it kind of enhances utilization of special needs trusts. As we're going to go through here, though, there's a lot of these concepts as we go through them. You don't always have to have a special needs trust. I mean, once again, they're just tools. When the tools all work together, it's a great thing. And part of this is trying to understand, how we can use all these tools. Before we jump into this, I've got one slide I did want to go through, which is in the POMs. And for those of you that are not familiar about what the POMs are, is these are the administrative regulations that are used here for eligibility workers within this Social Security Administration to tell them how to handle different situations. The POMs here, and for those of you that are practitioners, if you don't have this bookmarked, you might Google SIO 1130.740, and this will pop right up. One of the things that it has in that POMs and those directions is information about who can make a contribution. And when this was put through, it, once again, what the law says, it has to be, the contribution can be from any person, but Social Security defined person to include a trust or an estate or a partnership. They've made it pretty darn broad here. So once again, they can be tied both to third party and first party special needs trusts. So that's a good thing to keep in mind. I could have really extended the number of issues and advantages and issues we deal with here about ABLE accounts and all the many things that they do. And I think we're constantly discovering more things. We're going to talk about housing for SSI purposes and how you can avoid the ISM reduction here. It can be used for convenience. Once again, really key is having the prepaid card. I know I work with a lot of folks with developmental disabilities who, are kind of working on their skills and all of that here. And that card oftentimes can be absolutely essential to being able to access the funds. We're going to get into taxes, and I know we had a couple of questions already on taxes. We're going to get to this. The other thing about this that's really important is, let me just go back and emphasize this. This is not run by the Social Security Administration. This is run by the IRS. And because of that, we see a lot less scrutiny for folks. And I know when I'm doing planning, oftentimes, I like to use an ABLE account as my mode of distribution, and I think this is really key. ABLE accounts, were set up as a savings device, but I've got to tell you that a lot of the uses we use it for are, partially for savings, but we also use it as a mode of distribution. And we find in a lot of cases, this is a very good way to do this. And so once again, there's less chance of an overzealous eligibility worker at Social Security dinging you if you run these things through an ABLE account. So let's just go through this. On the housing thing, as we get into this. And the laws are changing coming up, but they're currently on the books. If you have somebody on SSI and they're not paying what's considered their fair share of their housing expenses, their benefits can be reduced dollar for dollar for the assistance that they get for their housing, capped at $334.33 in 2024. That's called the presumed maximum value rule. Now, those rules are going to be changing a little bit in the coming up this summer. So they're going to be eliminating food from that. So, hey, this is really cool. We could start feeding disabled people without a penalty. I don't know why we have a penalty in the first place, but housing is still an issue. And this is an area where an ABLE account can be really useful. So as far as that's concerned, what Social Security says is that you are not to count as income distributions from an ABLE account. And this is whether it's CalABLE or another program, whether the distributions are for non-housing QDEs, housing QDEs, so that would involve paying rent, or even non-qualified expenses. Okay. This is basically telling the eligibility workers to keep their hands off of this thing. Now, Anne did go, if you're using this for housing, and we're not going to get too deep in the woods, there are some, sometimes I think, very hard to understand rules that Social Security set up, having to do, for instance, if you take the money out in 1 month and then you hold it in your account into the next month where you could have a problem. So once again, if you're using this to pay rent, here, this is something you should work with, your counselor or whatever to make sure it's done right. But once again, if it's used for shelter, it's not subject to an ISM reduction, that $334.33 reduction. And the reason is, as Anne told us right from the beginning, the account is owned by the ABLE account holder. Okay, so basically what's going on is, let's say that I have a child with a disability. If I were to pay their rent directly here, then I am assisting the person with the disability and they're going to take that reduction. But if I put that money in a CalABLE account and then the CalABLE account pays the rent, even if it was only in the account for a nanosecond, for that nanosecond, it became the asset of the disabled individual. And now the disabled individual is paying their own rent. And that's why it doesn't count as an ISM reduction. This could be really big for a lot of folks that are living on, less than $1,200 a month in SSI, which is a real challenge. That loss of that $334.33 is a lot of money. And this can be a big thing. So let's go through an example. Let's say Belinda is a Golden State Pool Trust beneficiary and has been disabled from birth. So we don't have to deal with, are you disabled before the age of 26 or not? She receives $1,182.94 in SSI. And for that, she's supposed to pay for her food and shelter in California. That's really going to be, a heavy list. A major expenditure for, well, let's face it, for everybody is housing and utility payments. And she'd like to move to a nicer apartment that's maybe $1,400 a month. She's going to need some assistance to do that, because it's kind of hard to pay a $1,400 rental bill when you're only getting $1,182.94. If her trustee were to give her $1,400 directly, that's not going to work, because that's unearned income, and that's just going to wipe out her SSI completely. If her trustee were to pay the landlord directly, then it would count, but then we would take that ISM reduction of the $334.33 a month. So we're getting closer, and that's how we did business for years and years and years, until CalABLE came along. If the trustee were to contribute $1,400 a month to her ABLE account, and in turn the funds from the account were to pay the landlord, then there would be no reduction in the SSI, because At this point, she's paying for her rent with her own money. Now, does it have to be monthly? No, you could put the entire amount in for the year, And I will tell you, for some of our folks, we make the contributions when we do this monthly or quarterly. Some of them we do annually. It really just depends on, quite frankly, how vulnerable the person is to being taken advantage of. Okay, so anyway, this is a big thing. If the beneficiary lives in a home here of a parent or a relative, usually the reduction is because of implicit support, meaning that once again, let's say you have a child living with you in the home and you're not charging them rent. Well, there's a value of that, and they normally will take the $334.33 reduction. But if the beneficiary can pay what's considered their fair share, and on the GSPT website, we have a video on how to calculate fair share. Here, their share, then once again, if that is, even if the parent makes the contribution into the ABLE account and in turn turns around and pays themselves for their fair share, this can also mean that they won't take the $334.33 hit. Once again, we're going to see some changes coming up. So this summer, we're scheduled to no longer have a penalty for paying for food. And we're also anticipating some changes in shelter and some caps with that. Once again, housing, for all Californians, but especially for persons with disabilities, is a real challenge. And this is a way to really kind of ease the pain. A contribution from able to pay the full fair share of housing related expenses is involved. And once again, what we're trying to do is avoid that $334.33 reduction. Now, keep in mind, this is a concept for SSI. If you are not on SSI, and let's say you're getting Medi-Cal under the federal poverty level program, you're under a totally different program. So it's really important to know what kind of benefits we're trying to protect. Number two, ABLE accounts are convenient with or without SNTs here. And I don't want to overdo this, because a lot of our examples are going to be money going through an ABLE or going through a special needs trust into an ABLE account. This is especially useful when a parent passes away, because it's kind of hard to make gifts after you've passed away. But in a lot of situations here, you can do a lot of things I'm talking about without a trust. Okay. An ABLE account gives a beneficiary access to funds for eating out, recreation, to do a lot of things here that many of us take for granted. And oftentimes that prepaid account is going to be really useful here. There can be limitations on accounts managed by a beneficiary directly, and one of the things we're always, concerned about, of course, is, the opportunity for misuse or that kind of thing. I will tell you for ourselves, and let's just keep in mind here that the disability community is a very broad community. And as we like to say, if you've met one person with a disability, you've met one person with a disability. They're all individuals. We do have some of our beneficiaries that we are concerned about them, their vulnerability. And in those cases, oftentimes we may be making contributions to their ABLE account, a couple $100 a month or whatever, to just limit the exposure. We have a lot of folks, beneficiaries, where we are not as concerned, and we might make a lump sum payment really up to the entire amount, depending on the situation. So if there is a concern about the vulnerability of the beneficiary, you can, limit the amount of payments to the account as time goes on. And this just really depends on the situation. By the way, these accounts are especially useful when we're dealing with supported decision-making arrangements as well. Here, I mean, one of the differences between a special needs trust and an ABLE account is that with the special needs trust, the trustee has sole and absolute discretion. And for instance, I, as the trustee, if I'm your trustee, I have the ability to refuse to make any payments at all. And that's what keeps you qualified for benefits. An ABLE account is almost exactly the opposite. An ABLE account presumes that the person with the disability, so long as they have capacity, is going to be in charge of that account. So this is so once again, in those cases with an ABLE account, the beneficiary is in charge. In a lot of cases, that is a great goal. In some cases, it could be problematic, and it just depends on the situation. Taxes, and we did have a question about taxes. Okay, so, one of the things I like to say, or this may be an exception, is that simple and disability are two words that don't go together. But CalABLE might be the exception to that rule. If you're looking for simple, this is set up under 529 of the tax code, just like a 529 education program, and much like the the 529 plans, as long as you use the account properly here, everything grows tax-free in an ABLE account, and there's not really much more to discuss. The investment expenses are crazy low here, and normally there are no management costs. So I get people that ask, do I need to have an attorney to set up an ABLE account? No, you don't, right? Here, this is something you could do totally on your own here. And so with this, once again, everything grows tax-free, which can make things a lot simpler. Now, with a third-party trust or an estate planning trust, it is much more complex. Now, I actually, as a tax attorney, think there's a lot of opportunities with a third party or an estate planning trust. And we won't get too deep in the woods, but if we're talking about larger amounts, one thing that a third party trust does is it has a $5,000 annual tax exemption called the Qualified Disability Trust Exemption. A properly managed special needs trust will normally not pay any taxes. Oftentimes you'll see that special needs trusts are subject to a very high tax, and that's actually true if the people that are managing the trust don't understand taxes and they mismanage the investments. But with that, you're going to oftentimes need a professional trustee. And yeah, they're going to come with an expense, where once again, with the CalABLE account, there is no expense. A third-party trust can hold virtually any kind of asset that can be held in a trust. It can hold houses and different kinds of investments, and it can also be used for retirement plans, and you can get a stretch and that kind of thing here. So once again, when you're looking at these two tools, whether you are a consumer or a professional, you need to really look at what are the objectives of the person who's donating the funds, and also for the person with the disability. And really, by mixing and matching these two things, you can get a pretty good result here. Some limitations. Less and less of this, but we still do get situations where Social Security representatives don't seem to understand these things. We don't see this as much as we have in the past. I will tell you that if you run into a situation where you're being told by your Social Security representative that that, for instance, putting money in an Enable account and paying your rent doesn't reduce your benefits, you need to correct that situation as quickly as possible. And I would also suggest that you probably want to let the folks at CalABLE know as well, because I know that I've had a number of times when they've, have done some education for the Social Security workers, because if they're telling you that kind of thing, they're probably telling somebody else. Contributions are limited to $18,000 a year. It's basically whatever the gift tax exclusion is for the year here, which does have a cost of living amount. Don't forget that you can also put wages of the disabled individual on top of that, and that can be a really have a real dynamic benefit. It doesn't operate like a bank account here. Transfers do take time. And so, especially if you're in a situation here, it's good to understand what are the time limits and that kind of thing when you're looking at making purchases. As far as the suspension, remember, if you're on SSI, if you go over $100,000, your SSI is put on suspension, but your Medi-Cal is unaffected. A lot of times, by the time you get to the $100,000, especially if we're dealing with somebody with a developmental disability, by that time, if the parent has died, retired, or is on disability themselves, the child may go on childhood disability benefits anyway. So by that time, it may not make any difference. It may be subject to a Medicaid estate recovery or payback if Medicaid is used in another state and the recovery is from the time the account was set up. So let's say you set up even a CalABLE account, but then you go to Utah for a couple of years after you set up the CalABLE account and you use some Medicaid, and then you move back. Upon your death, there may be an estate recovery based on your usage in Utah, not California. Now, we also have a state recovery here. And actually, this is kind of incorrect what it says. It may be subject to a state recovery. That would be Medicaid recovery. We'll cover a little bit here. It could be subject to California estate recovery if the amount of funds go through probate. And we're going to cover that a little bit in a moment. Succession planning is not managed by a beneficiary. So this is one of these things where, once again, you need to really think about who's going to manage the account. Let's say if the person with the disability loses capacity. One thing you probably should look at is, if they're managing it, is to, for instance, get a power of attorney put in place immediately, and make sure that that power of attorney allows the agent to manage that ABLE account if the person with the disability loses capacity. It also can't own assets, like it can't own a house or that sort of thing. Contributions have to be in cash, and then of course here there's different investment options. Once again, as far as Social Security representatives, oftentimes they don't understand how they work. Once again, when you identify that kind of situation, here, this is an area where you might want to contact CalABLE, as I had kind of gone through here. We need to kind of reprogram that eligibility worker, because if they're giving you the wrong information, they're giving other people the wrong information here, and we need to educate those workers. And once again, we have had situations, doesn't happen a lot, but we have had situations recently where We have initially been told that the ABLE account is a resource, which just plain isn't true here. Usually that's pretty easy to correct if you do it pretty quickly. As far as limitation 2, as far as the 18,000, once again, keep in mind that currently you can also add another $14,480 of the account holder's earnings here. And there's some really good materials on this. I think my favorite place to go is the Disability Benefits 101.org website here when we're working with able to work programs here, and this can be very valuable itself. It doesn't operate like a bank account. I mean, you really do need to do some planning ahead, especially when you're dealing with the landlord. Here, electronic payments cannot be made directly to the landlord, and you need to request a check or pay the rent through the card if it's allowed. Electronic payments are allowed for the beneficiary's bank account. This would be a rep payee or a savings account. There is, once again, one of the great uses of this is to pay rent, but there's a timing issue you really got to work out. As Anne was telling us, that they have this rule that I wish they would just get rid of, that if the funds are taken out and held over into the next calendar month and they're on SSI, you may have a problem. Just going through this real quick, I think we've covered this about 3 times. This $100,000 a suspension, I think, is oftentimes misunderstood. So if you are on SSI and go over $100,000, the SSI is in suspense here. And then when it drops down below 100,000, then the SSI resumes. But you don't have to reapply for the SSI as long as you are otherwise eligible. Here is our last code here, which is, we'll go back to this. Our last code is 1100. So for those of you that are watching this for credit, here, your last code is 1100. So getting back to the recovery, let's go through this a bit, okay? Because I think this is important and oftentimes misunderstood. If we're talking about just anybody, okay, in California, if you're in California, if you have more than currently $184,500 that doesn't pass by a beneficiary designation or something along that line, if it's not in a trust or that kind of thing, then it may be subject to a probate. And California changed its law a number of years ago to say that we will only have the state recovery for any Medi-Cal used after the age of 55 here, and only from any assets that go through probate. So the situation would be, let's say you had $160,000 in your CalABLE account and you virtually had no other assets, or let's say you even owned a home and the home was in a living trust. Let's use that example. The house would pass by the living trust, so it wouldn't be subject to probate. And the $160,000 is less than $184,000. So it would be not subject to a formal probate, and it could be passed with an affidavit of small estate. And so there would be no recovery. Well, let's say instead what you have is $200,000 in your CalABLE account. Well, once again, in that situation, since you cannot put a beneficiary designation currently on a CalABLE account, then that would be subject to probate, and there could be a recovery. So a couple of things here is that for folks that are over 55, you'd want to really pay attention to this if you really care about whether or not there's a Medi-Cal recovery or not. And the other part of this is, like a lot of things here, ABLE, like all programs, is always going through changes. My hope someday is that they will allow a beneficiary designation under a CalABLE account in future legislation. So for you advocates out there, you just might want to keep that in mind. For ABLE accounts, generally, the federal law says that there is a payback for any Medicaid use from the time the account was established. Now, California, like a number of states, basically passed a law here that said that we will not make a claim against an ABLE account here if they use a CalABLE account. So they basically have eliminated the payback, not the estate recovery, but the payback, as long as the expenditures were in California. So if we go back to my example, let's say our beneficiary went for a time to Utah after the account was established and then moves back to California. Well, there would be a recovery for the Medicaid used in Utah, but not the recovery in California. For a third party or an estate planning trust, there is no payback because it was never owned by the beneficiary in the first place. Once again, for some people, that's a big issue. For some people, it's not. It just depends on the situation. Capacity. Once again, capacity can be a huge issue. When we're dealing with folks with disabilities, they're just people like everybody else. So we have a lot of folks with disabilities that do not have any capacity limitations whatsoever. We have some persons with disabilities who have very minimal capacity, and we got everything in between. So this would be kind of illustrate an issue here is, let's say Fred and Ellen have a daughter named Gail, who was born with severe developmental disabilities. Fred establishes a CalABLE account under his authority as Gail's parent. Okay. Gail lacks capacity to manage her account or to execute a power of attorney. Once again, we should never assume that. It just depends on the situation. Fred maintains signature authority as the parent. Fred and Ellen pass away in a tragic accident, and their neighbors and best friends, Paul and Betty, step up and take care of Gail. In order for Paul or Betty to assume signature authority over Gail's ABLE account, they're probably going to need to become Gail's guardian or conservator, adopt her, or possibly become the rep payee. The only part of this just to keep in mind is that CalABLE has a lot of benefit, no matter what the capacity level of the individual is. But if we have somebody who truly lacks the capacity to manage this, you should really think about, what happens if if in this case the parents pass away. And normally we're trying to avoid having to conserve somebody unless it's absolutely necessary. Once again, number 7 was it can't hold a resident, but it can certainly enhance the ownership of a residence. So we'll go through this last example, and then we'll go through some questions and answers. I've actually been really fortunate that I don't have the number, but I would guess that at least 5 or 6 folks in the last couple of years, we've helped buy houses here that we have put in the name of the person with the disability, but here or in their third-party trust, but we've used CalABLE to be able to pay for their utilities, that kind of thing. So let's see how this works. Sue Casa wants to provide her daughter Mia with a home to live in. Sue is concerned that if she puts the property in Mia's name, it will be subject to a state recovery lien. Additionally, if Mia were someday unable to live in the home and she sold it, it could interfere with her benefits eligibility. By the way, as far as the estate recovery lien is, if you just put it in a simple living trust in Mia's name, it wouldn't pass through probate, so it wouldn't be subject to estate recovery. I do tend to like to put houses in third-party trusts if a parent is making the contribution, once again, so that if the property is sold, we're going to have the flexibility to do what is best for Mia without going over any resource limits. Sue can purchase the home and title the property in a third-party trust. And let's say in this case, there's no mortgage. So what the POM says is that the trustee of the trust holds title to a house as a home, it would not be a resource to the beneficiary of here. So they're going to treat it as if, in this case, Mia owns the house, and it wouldn't be a resource if the beneficiary moved away from the home, which is one of the reasons I like to put the house in a third-party trust. And if the trust owns a legal title to the house, we're going to treat it as if she owns it under a concept they use called equitable ownership under a trust. This is something Social Security just made up, but it works in our favor, so we're going with it. An eligible individual does not receive in-kind income or maintenance in the form of rent, free rent, while living in a house that he or she owns here because of this concept of equitable ownership. If the trust pays for other shelter items, then you could have an ISM reduction if they're on SSI here. And so once again, what we want to illustrate is the ABLE account can be used to pay for these items without having to take that $334 reduction. So what we basically do in that case is that as far as the property taxes, utilities, and all of those different things, we would take the money from the trust, put it in the ABLE account, and have the ABLE account pay those things. And we would not take the ISM reduction because in that case, Mia is paying for her housing items here with her own funds. And that's how we avoid having that reduction. We're going to see some changes in that coming up this summer, so stay tuned both with GSBT and CalABLE. I'm sure there'll be more information as time goes on, but we're seeing a reduction in this issue but not an elimination of the ISM reduction coming up. So going through all that, some questions. Let me just mention one thing as we jump into this, and then Ann and I can try to field as many questions as we can. Big thing coming up is supported decision making, right? And a big move is persons with disabilities having more control over their lives here. And I will tell you that for you trustees out there, attorneys, and that kind of thing, I know when I am the trustee of the Golden State Pool Trust, especially for somebody who's on SSI, I have to pay attention to absolutely every expenditure out there, including like if we use a traditional TrueLink card or something along that line, I have to review every expenditure, including I know what feminine hygiene deodorant my beneficiaries are using and stuff that is really, quite frankly, none of my damn business. If I put the funds on an ABLE account, okay, and let the beneficiary use this could be their discretionary funds. And in a lot of cases, they can use that however they like without having to share that information with somebody else. I mean, that actually gives more autonomy, a little more dignity. I think in a lot of cases, this is a really cool way to go here, because once again, we want to normalize things as much as possible here and kind of give more control to the beneficiary. Amy, let's go through the most terrifying part of the presentation. Do we have any questions?
Okay, we do. So we're going to start with the first one. What are the tax implications of moving funds within the 18K limit from a first party pooled trust to an ABLE account? If one is below the income level at which taxes need to be filed, does such a transfer necessitate filing of taxes? What are the tax filing requirements and rules?
Well, here's a cool thing going back to my observation that rarely is simple and disability, or those two words go together, but this would be an exception. Moving money into an ABLE account is not a taxable event. That being said, if there is taxable income in the account, in the special needs trust account, merely moving it into an ABLE account isn't going to take the tax burden away. Okay. So if we have taxable income here, let's say the trust made $10,000 and you move it funds into the ABLE account, that's not a taxable event, so there's not going to be taxes on that, but you still have the investment income from the trust, and there's going to be taxes due on that. Does that make sense?
Okay, answered. Okay, next one. This one is for Anne. What is the recommendation of CalABLE account or CalABLE under the IRS guidelines for keeping receipts?
Again, CalABLE doesn't ask for the receipts, but we have been advised to recommend people keep those receipts. Again, it'd be just like if the IRS came to do an audit on your personal finances, they're going to ask for those receipts. So it would be treated just like any other audit. You would want to have those receipts available if they asked them for. So
And for how long? And for how long? How many years is the IRS guideline? Do you know?
Is it 5 or 7 years?
Well, I think normally it's 7, although, in this situation, I would probably hang on to them anyway, at this point. Right, as we kind of went through, to our knowledge, those of us that are ABLE advocates, and I like to count myself as an ABLE advocate, we're still waiting for a single case that's come up where the IRS has dinged somebody. Eventually it'll happen. The chances are very small, but it's probably best to hang on to those receipts. But then the other thing to kind of keep in mind, unless it was truly something that's not allowed, like using it for buying methamphetamines, here, that's probably going to be a problem here. The presumption is that almost every expenditure is a qualifying expenditure. So I would keep those records. I wouldn't get too anal about it. I don't think it has anything to do with size. But go back to this. As a planner, one of the things I do like about running expenditures through an ABLE account is it incredibly reduces the chance of going through a lot of scrutiny by the eligibility worker and the chance of a problem coming up here, which is always stressful whenever you have those kind of issues. And it just reduces a lot of the stress. It's just really hard to screw up using a CalABLE account. I guess if you work hard enough, you probably could, but
one thing I will add is if you are using a prepaid card, you can actually take a picture of your receipt and upload it to the system. So, that's another reason to really use that prepaid card, because if you lose a receipt, if you just take a picture of it and put it in your cloud out there, then you're going to have that receipt. But yeah, we have typically said between 5 and 7 years on receipts. Just again, it's the IRS. CalABLE isn't the one that's going to be monitoring it. So I would feel safe with 5 to 7 years.
Okay, next question. Do you have any experience with contributions to an ABLE account being made from an UTMA account? In our case, we are considering taking this step to qualify for the innovations waiver.
Now, I've got to say, I'm not sure what the innovations waiver is. Anne, are you familiar with that?
No, really the only thing that, I mean, I don't even, do you know what an UTMA account is, Dale?
Oh, I definitely know what a NEPA account is. Okay.
Okay. I don't know what that.
They're called Gift to Minors Act accounts and that kind of thing. So let's just
Okay.
kind of go back to basics. In fact, here's something that's really common. Let's say, your child is born, and all the checks start coming in here, and you go down to the bank and go, what am I going to do with all these checks? And they go, oh, you should set up a Gift to Minors Act account. Which would be the normal thing that you do, because it's an account that is for the child, but it's managed by the parent, usually until age 18 or 22, depending on how you set it up. And the key is that it belongs to the child, but the parent is a custodian. Well, here's the issue that comes up. And let's say that you've added to it, and then lo and behold, you discover later that Junior is in the autism spectrum, and these funds are not going to be used to go to school, right? So you go, I know what I will do. I will open up either a special needs trust or an ABLE account, and I will put it in the ABLE account. Here's where you run into problems. That money belongs to the person with the disability, and you probably don't have authority to move the funds, right? So there's a couple of ways to deal with this. And for instance, if you do have a Gift to Minors Act account for a child, and this could be an issue. This is one where you'd want to talk to your attorney or a planner to work through this. Because see, the problem with it is we've had this problem with special needs trust for years, that maybe the parent goes, oh, I know what I'll do. I wish I'd set up a special needs trust. I will just put it in the special needs trust. And there is a specific rule within the POMS that says, wait a minute, you can't do that because you just moved Junior's money, even if you were the person who contributed it, into a third-party trust, and you don't have the authority to do that. You could have the same situation with an ABLE account. So there would be two things you'd want to look at. One is, if the person has capacity. If your child has capacity, when they turn 18, you might have them move the account into an ABLE account. And that would be a safe harbor. Otherwise, you're probably going to be heading off to court to get that authority. And anytime you head off to court, we're talking big bucks here. So this is also one of the reasons why, if you do have people making gifts and the person is disabled, well, just open up a CalABLE account. We don't have a lot to discuss here. That is your safe harbor, not the Gift to Minors Act account or the UTMA account. So,
okay, we have about 5 more questions, so maybe we can get through them.
Sure.
Okay, are the filing requirements and other rules for first-party special needs trust accounts different than a pool are they different for pooled trusts from a third-party trust?
If you're dealing with a first-party trust, whether it's an individual trust or a pooled trust, you have to report to Social Security if they're on SSI, or Medi-Cal if they're on Medi-Cal, any changes in resources. So moving funds into a self-settled trust is a change of resources, and that must be reported. If it's a third-party trust, there's an argument that you don't have to report it, but you should, because if you don't, then there's a good chance that the eligibility worker is going to think that you're hiding something. In our practice, we always report a funded third-party trust. For a first-party trust, once it's funded, it needs to be reported. As far as an ABLE account, it doesn't need to be reported.
Okay,
Although
how,
Social Security does have access to that information.
Right, yeah, they do get a report, a monthly report of who has ABLE accounts. So CalABLE does report those accounts to Social Security.
So they've already done it for you. So
okay, you early in your presentation, you said how that a special needs trust, if managed correctly, should not be paying big, a lot of taxes.
right.
So how is that?
I'm
Just
going to
because
give
of the
a real short
$5,000
version of
exemption?
this, and we're going to be doing more on this coming up. We're talking about a third-party trust. Okay.
Mhm.
Part of this, if you plan right, and the high taxes that you hear about in a third-party trust, and we're talking about an estate planning trust, okay, that's what's called a complex trust. Hey, in my world, that's no more complex than anything else, but there you go. And with that, if um, if you produce more income than you distribute, then you can hit the highest tax rate somewhere around $11,000 or $12,000 if you retain that income. A third party trust comes with that $5,000 QDT exemption, and it also uh, once again, you're going to have administrative expenses, which are likely going to be a whole lot more than an ABLE account. So that's going to be the difference here. So that's subtracted. And then any distributions you make are going to carry out the income to the beneficiary, who can either offset that income with their own deductions here, or they're in a low tax bracket. So let me give you an example, because if you're not into taxes, that's probably a whole lot of gobbledygook. Let's say what you have in your Golden State Pooled Trust third-party account. Let's say what you get is that we've made $20,000 that year. Okay. And let's say your administrative expenses are 3,000, and we have our $5,000 QDT exemption. And if my math is right, we still got $12,000 to go. If we didn't make any expenditures, we would make that big. We would have that big tax. Let's say that what we actually do is we pay out of that 8,000, we pay out 18,000, and I'm choosing that number for a reason, either paying for things directly, or even if we run it through an ABLE account here, and let's say the funds are used by the beneficiary for deductible expenses like disability or transportation related to the disability, attendant care, that kind of thing. Then those taxes at the beneficiary's tax level are going to be offset by that, and odds are there'll be no taxes at all, or there's going to be minimal tax. And I know for this presentation, that's probably a lot to digest, but if you plan well, the vast majority of third-party trusts that we have pay no taxes at all. If you coordinate the expenditures with what the expected deductions are. One of the differences between CalABLE and the third-party trust is that takes a lot of planning and coordination. With a CalABLE account, hey, it's tax-free. There's, once again, it's pretty simple. What's the right answer? It really depends on your situation. I mean, for me, a trust is a tax planning tool, but it comes with a level of complexity here in order to get those results. And so you just have to look at the different tools and what you're trying to do.
Mhm.
Yeah. Oh, Amy, you're on mute.
Oops. In the Fred and Ellen example, do neighbors Paul and Beverly have to be the conservator of the estate, or will person work? Of course, there could be a rep payee.
It probably would be the estate. Now, when we first started using that scenario, well, and a lot of us are still trying to get used to the whole thing about the rep payee, because there are some limitations with the rep payee. But the thing about it is, once again, when we have a situation like that, we'd really want to look at it and see what makes sense. Most of the accounts I deal with, and CalABLE can be used for so many different things. Most of what I use CalABLE for is I use it as a mode of distribution because I'm the trustee of the trust, right? We don't really use it as a savings account, which many people do. Maybe even the vast majority of ABLE users do. We use it for the ISM reduction, and we also use it for discretionary funds for a person with a disability. Once again, we also use it for teaching financial literacy. So we have a number of regional center clients where we set up a small ABLE account, which they can manage, and we put a little bit in. And then as they get a little better at making the expenditures, then we increase the amount and that sort of thing. I would say in a case, in that example, if there's really a concern about who the successor is going to be, you probably would dictate how you would want to use the ABLE account. And if the child does have capacity, then hey, let's go hog wild. Let's put it up to the 18,000 and go for it. And thoughts?
No, I agree with you, Steve. And it's there, like you said, that it's really kind of what are those assets going to look like in the end. If you're going to have a lot of assets, it's probably better to keep it in that special needs trust and transfer it in and out of CalABLE. It's not a lot of assets, it's probably going to be better just economically to be in the CalABLE account. So it's really kind of what do those assets look like? And then the successor, if they're siblings, those accounts get right, they move right into those siblings and there's no additional penalties or taxes. So if they're eligible for an ABLE account as a sibling, that's a nice pass through that you can just pass the funds right over. So
and we may be caught up in this because I have to tell you, just as somebody who does a lot of programs, they keep changing the rules. So we're seeing, like many things here, we're seeing an evolution with ABLE accounts across the country and trying to make them more and more friendly, upping the age limitation. I think we can continue to see that as time goes. So you just have to apply it to the situation. The issue with me is that since we deal with a lot of people with severe capacity issues, you just got to think it through, about how you're going to deal with this. Yeah. Amy, should we knock off a couple more here?
Yeah, here's one that is being asked for Anne to respond. I'm the trustee of a third-party special needs trust for my son with severe mental illness. He is on SSDI, Medicare, and Medi-Cal. Is there any advantage in him having a CalABLE account? If so, what are they?
Well, with SSDI, you don't have that $2,000, asset limit there. So that's a nice thing. But really the advantage is that he's going to be able to get a little easier access to his money. If it's all tied up in that special needs trust, he's always going to have permission to withdraw those funds. If he puts it in CalABLE, he can have access to those funds, and probably even going with the prepaid card so he doesn't completely exhaust the account. So you have some controls on how those funds are being spent. It's just another tool for him to have that allows him to accumulate funds, that he can use easily, but also it's a savings place for him, for retirement. So you can't lose having a CalABLE account if he's on SSDI.
There
You know?
also does come with a certain amount of asset protection
Mhm.
here, and that's always a good thing. So
Yeah.
kind of the difference between the two. The third party trust is a spendthrift trust. Trustee has sole and absolute discretion. The ABLE account is almost exactly the opposite. It's the presumption is the person with the disability is going to be in control here. And so it's the antithesis. With a little work, you can kind of strike a balance.
And that's what we want. We want people to feel empowered, but we also want to have some guardrails.
Okay, the last two questions have to do with taxes. Who can file taxes on behalf of a conserved adult with a disability if there is no conservatorship of the estate? Can a conservator of a person's rep payee who files the tax return?
The if I'm assuming that we're talking about a limited conservatorship for a person with a developmental disability, it would probably be true for a general conservatorship too, that a conservatorship of the person can enter into contracts and can advocate for the person. I would assume in a case like that, you wouldn't need to get a conservatorship of the estate. You would not want to get a conservatorship of the estate. Here, and a conservatorship of the person should be able to do that here.
Okay, and who reports the third party SNT? The trustee, the beneficiary, or the trustee of the main trust?
On a third party trust, anybody could actually report it. It's actually, there's an argument it doesn't need to be reported. I think that's a big mistake. I think it's always good to report. It could be the rep payee, it could be the person with the disability. My personal feeling is that if you're working with an attorney, I prefer to have the attorney to report. But just keep this in mind. If there's a problem or whatever, they're either going to go back to the person with the disability, the benefits recipient, or the rep payee here. So you need to make sure that when you're doing your reporting, you may need to make sure that the rep payee and the beneficiary knows that the report was made. And also, if there is a problem with Social Security or Medi-Cal or whatever, that they notify you as soon as possible so you can fix any whoopses that come up, right? So I think it's always best to report, partially because Social Security and Medi-Cal, Department of Healthcare Services, have access to anything with your Social Security number on it. And if they find that your third party trust here that's producing income and they don't know what it is, they're going to assume that you're hiding assets. Okay. So it's best to when the trust is funded, to report it. Anyone can do it. I think the best practice is, well, maybe because I'm an attorney, is for the attorney to do it, but it doesn't have to be the attorney. Anyway, I think we ran out of questions here, and I'm sure we could go on further, but and just kind of in closing, going back to this, first off, I want to thank you here, and I know that CalABLE from the beginning has always been consumer friendly and has been really big on education and that sort of thing. Here, so I'm going to give you the last word here. So how should people get to know a little bit about CalABLE? How can they get engaged in this? How can they keep up to date with what all the different changes and stuff going on to determine whether CalABLE is right for them or their loved ones?
That's a great question, Steve. And there's so many different mediums that we use to inform people. First I would definitely go to that calable.ca.gov website. On that website is a resource tab, and it's got all our webinars that we do. We do a monthly webinar, just so many different topics. We've done, how to open an account. It's a tips and tricks, and the webinar actually takes you screen by screen on how to open an account. We've had webinars on qualified disability expenses, because we know our account holders are always asking questions. So that is just a really great resource for somebody who's wanting to learn more about it, isn't sure, is this the right thing, or I have more questions. But then you can always reach out to our, reach out to our calable@treasurer.ca.gov. You can always send us an email there. And if you have questions about the program, certainly send us your questions, and we can always call you back. So we're accessible on the phone, we're accessible through email. We have all our social medias that I had mentioned earlier, our YouTube channel, Facebook, Instagram, and X, and LinkedIn. So we are very accessible. And then if you have questions about your account, there's always the call center. You can reach out to that 833 CalABLE number. They're there 6 to 5, Monday through Friday. So as you know, Steve, we have a very small team at CalABLE. There's actually 4 of us on staff for the entire state, but we really rely on our partners at Vestwell to really handle those customer questions for the program, for the accounts. And we work with a lot with the regional centers, so you can always ask questions at the regional centers, and they are informed about CalABLE. So thank you for that. I really appreciate your invitation today to join you on this webinar. Special Needs Trust is always a popular topic, and so I do appreciate your time today. And thank you.
Fantastic. And thank you to you and the team here. Just like in closing, for those of you that are taking this for credit, make sure you download the proper forms here at gspt.org/attorney-resources. Here, if you really get lost and need some help, you can also email amy@gspt.org. Thank you very much, and happy advocating.
Thank you.